to Wineline Radio. This is your host, Robert Scott. I'm here today with David Forer. We are continuing our series on non-left coast wines. This particular tasting today will be called No Longer Middling. These are wines from the Midwest. Last week we did the Wild East and tasted some excellent wines, and then coming up we'll be doing the New West. But the question that begs is, what if the San Andreas Fault imaginarily opened up bigger than expected and we lost all the East, all the wines from California, Washington, and Oregon? Where would you go for wine? Well, I think this program answers that question. Good morning, David Forer. How are you?
Good morning, Robert. Doing just fine. Looking forward to tasting wines from my native Midwest.
Excellent. So where do you think we ought to start today? And tell me a little bit about how the picture of where the wine quantity in the States is coming from has changed.
When I started out in the wine world a quarter century ago, you can easily say that 95% of the wine produced in the United States was coming out of California. While the pie has grown considerably, there's a lot more wine being produced now than it was in the early 90s. That percentage for California has diminished to hovering around 90%, where the lion's share of that greater percentage increase, that's gone out east into various places, including what we're tasting today from Michigan and Missouri. But it's spread out considerably. Now all 50 states in the U.S. are producing, some level of quality wine. And that said, there's a ramp up in interest everywhere in the United States for these wines. Historically, of course, wine started on the East Coast, but we've now had a liking for it everywhere. We'll be talking a little bit about the tourism aspect too.
Well, that sounds great. Looking forward to getting right into it. What would you suggest for the first wine to try today?
Well, let's start off with Michigan. And Michigan has two broad wine producing regions, and they're both located in the western part of the state. Down south, we got the Lake Michigan Shore area, and there are other AVAs as part of that. And up north, we got the Twin Peninsulas area of Leelanau and Old Mission, with the hub down there being the point where they all meet at Traverse City. Now, wines, and mind you, it was a tough selection, knowing Michigan wines as I do, to winnow it down to just the two choices of wineries we're having today. And full disclosure, I've done project work for some of these wineries up in the Leelanau Old Mission area near Traverse City. And one of which we'll be tasting today is from the Bonobo Winery. Now, this area, just to define it, it's all pretty well influenced by Lake Michigan. So the proximity of the lake has a lot to do with what happens in the wines. Now down south, because it's the southern portion of the lake, and it gets a little bit more warmth, and the water is not as cold as it is up north. Down south, they got issues with humidity, and it's also a bit warmer, so you find a bit more red wines being grown there as well. Up north, it's become well known for aromatic white varieties such as Riesling, though today we're going to be focusing on a Chardonnay, which I really like. As well, the soils tend to be a bit different. Down south, where there's a bit more sun and humidity, it's a bit more sandy. Up north, it's still got sand, of course, but it's got a bit more wind, less humidity, a little bit cooler, obviously. But they also got some patches of rocky soils, gravelly soils, and a bit more elevation. Not a whole lot by comparison to some parts of the world, but still a bit. So you got some differentiations there. Back to the winery. The Bonobo Winery is a project of two brothers, the Oosterhouses, one of whom, Carter, is a semi-famous TV guy. And his brother Todd and he have been, along with their wives, have been fashioning some really nice wines in a very short period of time. And though I do enjoy Rieslings up there from the likes of Bonobo, Bel Lago, Brengman Brothers, and Black Star Farms. This particular one, we're going to taste a Chardonnay. So let's have that together. Could we, Robert?
Okay, let me pour a little taste of that. There we go. Looking forward to this. Mm. Nose is very nice. Maybe it's because it's early in the morning, but I'm really getting almonds and maybe a little touch of caramel or butterscotch on the backside.
Yeah.
And
very clean, fresh, a lighter style. Nothing rich and overwhelming like you get often in California.
right.
It's not a butterball, not by a long shot. Clean, classy. This is a 2016 vintage from Bonobo. I dare say, you can drink this now, but I suspect being as minerally and crisp and focused as it is, it'll be better in a year or two time if you can wait that long.
Yeah, it really reminds me kind of like a Montrachet style Burgundy. Yeah, very nice. I'm enjoying it. And I'll spit now. Excuse me. All right. Well, bravo, Michigan.
Indeed. And you know what? It's they do a whole lot of great business out of the tourism folks. People come in there mostly in the summer. But as where they're located, it's not exactly welcoming in the winter.
Yeah.
So things go pretty quiet there. It's remarkable. Again, I've done some project work for the folks up there, and I got to tell you, it's hard to be a hero in your own hometown. You've probably heard that phrase before. And as good as these wines are, and as well as they sell to people who come visit, I know for a fact that to find these wines in major markets like Chicago and Detroit can be a bit trying. And so, it's harkening back to what we talked about earlier about, in the Wild East. It can't be. It's not the easiest thing to find them at your major retailers when you get around. And so, I think you mentioned the Go-Wine outlet could be a one way to get these wines that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I would assume that most of these wineries probably have a wine club or somewhere that you can buy direct from them, do a DTC, direct to consumer availability.
Indeed. Let's head down south now.
All right.
Now, anybody who's driven through Michigan doesn't live around there. If they drive through I-94 between Chicago and Detroit, they're very likely to have seen the signs along the road advertising the various wineries there in the southwest corner. One of the largest and one of the best known of those is St. Julian. And the Braganini, let me see if I'm pronouncing this good. Yeah, the Braganini family has owned that for some years. And the current GM and winemaker, Nancy Oxley, has recently commemorated the passing of the founder of the winery with a line of wines entitled Braganini, even though it is a St. Julian wine. And today we're going to be tasting a really unusual white grape variety to find not only in Michigan, but let's say anywhere in the United States. And that's Albarino, which is from the northwest corner of Spain, that grape variety is. And some of us know those wines from last several years of eating great Spanish seafood dishes and drinking great Spanish wines. But very little has been planted in the U.S. I've tasted some good examples out of California, but not much elsewhere. And so when I heard that Ms. Oxley had planted and was letting on the market some Albarino, I reached out to her very enthusiastically, asking her to send us some of her 2016. And Robert, before we started this conversation, you told me you tipped into this last night.
Yes, we had a little tasting last night upstairs at the Citrus Club with my what I laughingly call my gang of wine tasting panel. And everybody really liked this Albarino. I don't find it quite as flinty as the Spanish variety, but boy, it's got a nice long finish. And interestingly enough, I left it open all night, and I'm now smelling and tasting it after it's been open 14 hours, and I'm just amazed at how well it's held up. It's really, I just get this great Meyer lemon rush when I stick my nose in the glass. And a little green apple, not much grassiness, I don't think. What do you get?
Grassiness would be a negative character in
Right.
Albarino, to be sure. No, this is absolutely variety correct. I'm with you on your comments about it. Clean, fresh, dry, and definitely flies in the face of what people have come to expect about Michigan wines. Quite often, if you're a tourist passing through, there is a lot of cheap and easy and sweet wines to be had. However, and there's a lot of great wines out of Michigan too. I don't want to be pejorative here, and this certainly fits in the bill of one of those great ones. This is bone dry and would serve up really nicely with lighter seafood dishes with a touch of lemon butter, bit of herbs. I find this really refreshing, really spot on, and a good bellwether to go along with saying that look for unusual varieties out of unusual places, and this certainly is one of them.
Well, that certainly fits that profile, and really enjoyed the wine.
Mm.
So shall we move on to Missouri?
Let's head south now. Missouri is one of the older wine growing areas in the American U.S. area. And what it's really known for these days is a grape variety called Norton. And I'm not going to go into details about the ampelographic background of the grape variety, but it's not a pure vinifera, but it has a good relation, at least in terms of how it tastes, to the better vinifera red grapes. Norton, Norton, spelled like it sounds, has found its home definitely in Missouri. You'll find a fair amount in Virginia too, but I reckon to say the best examples I've had to date have come from Missouri. And the St. James Winery, one of the better known and larger wineries in the state, has been doing exemplary work with this grape for some years now. And I bumped into their winemaker, actually a native Australian who's been there a long time. He's the GM as well. And he was really excited, Robert, to be sending not only one example of his standard Norton number 42, but he also wanted to taste this out on a blend 43 that's made with some Chambourcin, which is another, shall we say, beleaguered red grape you don't find too often. It's a cross. You'll find it in all the odd places of the world, but he wanted us to taste this one as well.
Yeah, I've run across it in the Loire Valley in France.
I've tasted ones from as odd a place as Queensland, Australia.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah, let's go on to have. I think it's a grape that contends well with heat and humidity, which is something they have to deal with quite often
Sure.
in Missouri. So there is a boom in winery tourism in Missouri, just as there is in Michigan, and a lot of it is focused on the best quality areas, probably the Ozark Highlands in the southwest of the state. St. James is located there, along with a great many other wineries. So which one we taste first, Robert? The 42 or the 43?
Well, let's since I've got the 43 open, and here again we tasted it last night, and I left it open, so it's been open a little over 14 hours or so. And again, this I'm amazed at how well the wine's held up over that period of time. I get a real intense blast of fruit flavors right off the bat. I get a little cedar box in there, not a lot, but red currant. And tasting it now.
Yeah, it's a lighter, cleaner style of red wine. Brisk berry notes to it, easygoing.
Yeah, right. It tastes even better than it did last night.
Mm.
I'm amazed. So that is the Blend 43 Ozark Mountain Wine.
The oh, and just as a point, these are all very, very fresh. These are both 2017s.
Right.
One could argue that they're not yet quite in the market, but I presume they're 2016. It can be found.
Yeah, I assume that when the Blend 43 came in with a label printed off of the in-house printer, I assumed it hadn't been bottled or labeled or sent out for distribution as yet. I tell you what, it's going to be very nice.
Yeah, this 42, I've already helped myself to here. Got more concentration here, more body, more depth. It's showing more direct Norton characteristics. That Chambourcin very clearly has that light and bright and easy character. That certainly tweaked the wine a bit. For my money, I prefer the straight Norton 42. It's more varietally correct. It tells me it's Norton, and it's a bit more tannin, not a lot, but the body, the concentration of fruit certainly takes that tannin very, very well.
I think it's really well integrated. Get a little subtle oak in the background.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'd recommend that when people are planning their summer vacations, that they keep in mind that wherever it is they choose to travel in the United States, you're going to find quality wine areas to visit. Now, whether you're driving through or flying in and doing it that way, check your maps, check with your various state wine organizations. Missouri's got one. Michigan's got one. Usually they're headquartered in those state capitals. And they'll refer you on their websites or via telephone where the wine trails or the wine areas are located, so you can plan some time to visit these wineries when you're out there.
David, that's a great idea, and I find that these lesser known areas that are producing wine are even more hospitable toward wine tourism than the typical California wineries.
Well, they're certainly less expensive these days. You got to pay a lot of money to get just to taste wines in most places in California. Fortunately, those high tasting fees aren't as common or as high when you go farther east.
Well, this has just been a delightful tasting, and I really like I really like the Norton. I agree with you 100%. That's indicative of the grape variety. Blend 43 is nice. I find it lighter and, I don't want to say more refreshing, but easier drinking than the Norton. Don't need to have it with food so much type of thing. So that takes care of no longer middling wines from the Midwest. And on Monday, after a short weekend, we will be tasting the New West wines. Looking forward to that, David.
As am I.
Thank you very much, folks. That's all for today, but stay tuned and you'll find out what's happening in the New West next week.